Have you ever stayed in a hotel room that felt wrong? Where the silence was too heavy, the shadows seemed too long, and you couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was in there with you? At the Beaumont Inn, there is one room guests are never supposed to enter room 6. For years, it has remained locked, a secret buried behind peeling wallpaper and whispers the staff refuse to explain. But on one stormy night, a desperate couple was given the key. By morning, they were gone, and when the cameras were checked, they showed something impossible. The couple never left the room. Tonight, you'll hear the story of the hotel guest, and once you do, you'll never look at a hotel hallway the same way again. The Beaumont Inn was the kind of hotel that looked tired even in the daylight. Its red brick walls leaned with the exhaustion of decades, windows cloudy with grime, and an antique sign swinging above the door that squealed whenever the wind pushed through. For years, truckers, salesmen, and families on road trips had stopped for a cheap bed, but the locals never spoke about the place. If they did, their voices lowered, as though the very name carried something foul. Room 6 had been locked for as long as anyone working there could remember. New owners came and went, new staff rotated in, but the door to room 6 remained sealed with 2 rusting bolts. Guests sometimes asked why the door down the left hallway was chained shut. The staff, trained to brush it off, would say, "Old storage room. Pipes are busted." Nobody wanted to explain what really happened in room 6. On a storm-drenched Friday night, a middle-aged couple checked in, David and Laura Harwood, exhausted from driving 8 hours through rain-slicked highways. The front desk clerk, a wiry man named Joel, scanned the reservations, biting his lip. Every room had been filled. A church conference in town had brought unexpected crowds, and they had run out of space. Every room except one. Joel stared at the old brass key hanging alone on the hook, covered in a thin film of dust. Number 6, he hesitated. He could hear his old manager's voice warning him never to hand that key to anyone, never open that room again, no matter how bad business gets. But Laura was rubbing her temples, David impatiently tapping the counter, asking if they should just keep driving to the next town. Joel swallowed hard. Rain battered the windows, thunder rattled the glass. Against every shred of instinct, he forced a smile and slid the key across the desk. "Room 6, he said quietly. "It's available." The couple lugged their bags upstairs, their shoes squeaking on the faded carpet. The hallway leading to room 6 felt colder than the others, lined with peeling wallpaper that had curled away like dried skin. At the end, the heavy oak door waited, paint cracked, brass numbers tarnished green with age. David shoved the key in and twisted. The lock resisted, as though the door itself didn't want to open. Finally, with a groan of wood, it swung inward. The air inside was stale, almost sweet, like rotting flowers left in a vase too long. The room was dimly lit by a single bulb that flickered once before humming alive. A king-sized bed crouched in the center, its quilt patterned in faded roses. An antique dresser leaned against the far wall, a cracked mirror above it. Lavra wrinkled her nose. "Smells off." "Like something died in here." David set their bags down. "Better than driving another hour in this storm." He flopped onto the bed, the mattress sighing like lungs expelling air. For a while, everything seemed normal. They unpacked, changed clothes, and tried to settle in. Rain drummed against the window, masking the uneasy silence that seemed to radiate from the walls. Joel, downstairs at the desk, tried to keep his mind off what he'd done, but he couldn't shake the image of that key in their hands. He found himself glancing at the old black and white photograph hung on the wall behind the counter, a picture of the hotel from 1927. If you looked closely, you could see a faint figure standing at the window of room 6. Around midnight, Laura stirred awake. She had heard something soft, deliberate. A knock, not from the hallway, but from inside the room. She sat up, heart ticking fast. David snored lightly beside her. Another knock. From the closet, her breath caught. She whispered, "David?" Shaking his shoulder. He grunted, half asleep. "What is it?" The knock came again, louder, 3 slow thuds. David frowned and climbed out of bed, muttering about faulty pipes or loose boards. He crossed to the closet, fingers wrapping the handle. Laura sat frozen, clutching the blanket. He yanked the door open. Nothing. Just empty space, a few wire hangers swaying as though touched moments before. David laughed nervously. "See?" Nothing. He shut the door and turned back toward the bed. That's when Laura screamed. Behind him, in the cracked mirror above the dresser, she saw a second reflection, a pale man standing directly behind David, his mouth stretched into a grin too wide to be human. David spun around. The room was empty. But the closet door was open again. David stood frozen, staring at the closet door now hanging half open. His throat felt dry, as if the room itself had swallowed all the moisture from the air. He reached out, shoved it shut with a hard slam, and forced a laugh that cracked in his chest. "Old hinges," he muttered, though the words sounded hollow. Laura didn't reply. Her eyes stayed fixed on the mirror above the dresser, unwilling to leave the spot where she'd seen the thing. David finally climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin, though the warmth of the blanket did nothing against the chill crawling over his skin. They tried to sleep, but the room would not let them. The bulb in the ceiling ticked softly, flickering in intervals, shadows stretching and shrinking across the walls like grasping fingers. Lara swore she heard someone breathing in the corner near the dresser, ragged and shallow. David heard it too, but refused to admit it, rolling onto his side and pressing his face into the pillow. Downstairs, Joel was at the desk, staring at the monitor showing the security feeds. The cameras were old, black and white, always buzzing with static. His finger hovered above the button that cycled through the different floors. He forced himself to check the feed for the second-floor hallway, outside room 6. There was nothing at first. Just the dim corridor, wallpaper peeling in strips, the occasional shadow of a moth fluttering against the light. Joel exhaled, relieved. Then the static surged and the picture darkened. A figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. Too tall, its head almost brushing the ceiling, standing unnaturally still. Joel leaned closer, squinting, his pulse quickening. The figure tilted its head slowly, as though it were staring into the lens of the camera. And then, without moving its legs, it was suddenly closer halfway down the hall. Joel cursed, fumbling for the switch to turn the monitor off, but his hand froze. The screen flickered again, and the figure was gone. When Joel finally looked up, the old photograph of the hotel behind him rattled gently against the wall, though no draft stirred the air. Upstairs, Laura woke again sometime after 2. Her mouth was dry, her throat tight. She sat up, blinking into the dark. The rain outside had stopped, but she could still hear dripping steady drops like water leaking into a bucket. She realized with dawning horror the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the corner of the room. "David," she whispered, shaking him. He groaned, sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What now?" The dripping sound grew louder, heavier, until it wasn't water at all but something thicker. They turned toward the corner by the closet. A dark stain spread across the ceiling, dripping steadily down the wall. The smell hit them next copper, sharp and unmistakable. Blood. He flicked the light switch, but the bulb popped with a sharp crack, plunging the room into darkness. In the split second before it went out, Laura saw something move in the mirror again. Not a reflection this time, but a pale hand pressing from the inside of the glass, fingers splayed, smearing the cracked surface. They scrambled for the door. David twisted the knob, yanked hard, but it wouldn't open. He shoved with his shoulder, cursed, pulled again. The door felt welded shut. Then the knocking started, Not from the closet this time, but from underneath the bed. 3 slow thuds. Laura screamed, backing into the dresser, her hands clutching the edge. She felt the wood pulse beneath her fingers, as if something alive throbbed inside. The mirror above shivered, cracks spreading outward like a spider web. David dropped to his knees, peered under the bed, despite every instinct screaming not to. At first, there was only darkness. Then 2 eyes blinked back at him, wide, milky, unblinking. He recoiled, slamming into the nightstand. The thing under the bed began to drag itself out, pale fingers clawing at the carpet, its grin stretching impossibly wide, teeth black as oil. The dresser toppled, the mirror shattering across the floor. Laura cried out, blood running down her palm where the glass had cut her. Joel, still downstairs, jolted upright at the sound of a scream, echoing faintly through the vents. His hands trembled as he reached for the old landline phone, then stopped. He knew he should call the police, but then his eyes fell on the key rack. The slot where room 6's key had been was empty, the brass hook swaying gently as though mocking him. And he remembered the stories. He remembered what the last manager told him before disappearing for good. If you give that key to anyone, you might as well bury them yourself. Upstairs, silence fell suddenly. David turned, gasping, his chest heaving. The bed was empty. Lara was gone. The closet door creaked open, slow as a breath. "Lara?" He whispered, his voice cracking. A pale hand emerged from the darkness inside, dripping red onto the carpet. David stumbled backward, his breath tearing out of him in ragged bursts. The pale hand slid slowly across the carpet, dragging the rest of its body into view. It wasn't Laura, it was something wearing her skin. The shape of her face stretched wrong, mouth hanging too wide, eyes milky and void. "Lavra?" His voice cracked, breaking into a sob. What happened to you?" The figure twitched its head, bones cracking audibly as it tilted. When it opened its mouth, the voice that came out was not hers, but a chorus of whispers, dozens layered together. She stayed. David turned and threw his weight against the door again. This time it burst open, as if the room had grown tired of holding him. He bolted into the hallway, heart pounding. Behind him, he heard the wet drag of something crawling across the carpet, the sound following him. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. He ran past peeling wallpaper, past buzzing lights, but the end never seemed closer. The air thickened, clinging to his lungs. He stumbled, gasping. When he looked back, room 6's door stood wide open, though he had left it behind long ago. Something moved in the doorway, something tall, too tall. Its head bent sideways to fit through the frame. David screamed and ran harder. Downstairs, Joel was pacing the lobby, every muscle in his body tight with dread. He knew what was happening up there. He had heard the screams before. Years ago, when he first took the night job, an older clerk had told him the truth. Room 6 had once been occupied by a man named Silas Beecham. Back in the 1920s, a traveling salesman who checked in, smiling and polite. He rented the room for months, paying in advance, keeping to himself. Nobody noticed the smell at first. Nobody questioned why women checked in with him and never checked out. When they finally opened the door, they found bones piles of them. Arranged neatly beneath the floorboards, stacked in patterns, jaws propped open in silent screams. The newspapers wrote about it, but the hotel changed hands, the story buried under time, and Joel knew Beecham never left. Upstairs, David collapsed against the wall, sweat soaking through his shirt. He was sure his heart would stop from the pounding, but when he looked up, he wasn't in the hallway anymore. He was back inside room 6. The bed stood in the center, the closet door ajar, the dresser upright again, mirror whole. Everything exactly as it had been when they first entered. And Lavra was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. Her face pale, her smile small but gentle. "Lara," he whispered, staggering toward her. Relief flooded him, though doubt gnawed at the edges. She tilted her head, voice soft. "It's all right, David. Sit with me." He froze. There was something in her eyes, something watching from behind them, like someone peering out through a mask. The mirror behind her rippled, as though water moved across its surface. In the shifting glass, David saw not his wife, but a man's face, gaunt and hollow, his lips stretched into a grin. "Who are you?" David whispered. Laura's smile widened. "I never left this room." The lights went out. In the darkness, hands grabbed him from behind, too many hands, cold and strong. They dragged him backward, away from the bed, away from his wife's shape. He screamed until his throat tore, but the sound dissolved into the black. Downstairs, Joel heard the silence fall again. He closed his eyes, whispering a prayer he hadn't spoken since childhood. He knew the couple was gone. He knew room 6 had claimed them. But then the phone on the front desk rang. Joel jumped, staring at the old rotary phone. Dust shook off the receiver as it rattled. He hesitated, then slowly picked it up. "Front desk," he managed, his voice trembling. On the other end, silence, then a voice, faint and breathless. "Help me." It was Laura. Joel's hand shook so violently the phone nearly slipped from his grasp. "Where are you?" "Downstairs," the voice whispered. Joel spun around, his stomach dropping. The lobby was empty. The only sound was the steady hum of the old vending machine in the corner. Then he saw her, Laura, standing in the doorway of the lobby, drenched, barefoot, eyes wide with terror. "Please," she begged, voice cracking. "He's still up there." "Yes, David." Joel's blood ran cold, because he had heard those exact same words before. Different woman, different year, same face twisted with fear. She had come running into the lobby, screaming for help. And when he followed her back upstairs, the room was empty, just bones. Joel stepped back, shaking his head. "You're not real." Laura's face flickered like a film reel burning. For a second, her skin turned gray, her smile cracking too wide. Then she was herself again, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let him keep me." The lobby lights buzzed. The phone crackled in Joel's hand. And faintly, from the second floor, he heard knocking again, slow, deliberate, from inside room 6. Joel stood frozen in the lobby, the phone receiver still pressed to his ear. On the line, the faint sound of breathing continued, steady and raw. Across the room, Laura's figure trembled in the doorway, eyes pleading. "Please," she whispered again. "Come with me. Save him." Joel knew he should run. Leave the hotel, never look back. But something stronger than fear rooted him to the spot. He'd carried the weight of room 6 for years, watched it swallow lives, done nothing but turn keys and lie to guests. Maybe this was his chance to undo at least one thing. He set the phone down and picked up the old brass key from behind the desk. His hand shook as he gripped it, the metal icy cold. Laura's face softened in relief, and she beckoned him. They climbed the staircase together, each step groaning under their weight. The second-floor hallway yawned open, dim lights buzzing overhead. The door to room 6 stood waiting, slightly ajar. Joel hesitated, every instinct screaming, "Don't go closer." But Laura slipped inside, her silhouette swallowed by the dark. Joel forced himself forward, his heart pounding in his throat. Inside, the room looked wrong. The angles bent subtly, like the walls leaned in on him, shrinking the space. The bed stood in its center, covers perfectly made, as though no one had ever touched them. The air stank of rot and iron. "Lavra?" Joel whispered. Something shifted near the dresser. For a second, he saw her kneeling on the floor, hands clutching at something heavy. Then the image rippled, and it wasn't Laura at all but a man, his face gaunt, his smile carved too deep into his cheeks. Silas Beecham. Joel stumbled back, gasping. The salesman straightened, his head cocked at an unnatural angle. His voice came in a smooth drawl, layered with echoes. Guests come, guests stay. That's the business. The mirror behind him quivered like water. Inside its surface, Joel saw countless faces staring out, men, women, children all pale, their mouths open in silent screams. He saw David among them, his palms pressed against the glass, eyes bloodshot with terror. "David!" Joel cried, lunging forward. His hands smacked against the mirror's cold surface, but it rippled, refusing him. David's mouth moved soundlessly. "Help me." The room's light died again, plunging everything into shadow. Joel turned, and suddenly Laura was at his side again, clutching his arm. "Break it," she whispered. "Break the glass." "You can free them." Joel grabbed a shard from the shattered dresser mirror on the floor, raised it high, and smashed it against the wall mirror. Glass exploded, raining down like ice. For a heartbeat, he thought he'd done it. Faces within the mirror howled, stretching forward, the surface splintering wide. But then he realized the sound wasn't freedom, it was laughter. The faces grinned, their mouths splitting wider, teeth black and jagged. Arms reached from the shards, clawing at him. Joel screamed, stumbling back. Laura's grip tightened. He turned to her for help, only to find her face melting, skin sliding away to reveal Silas again, grinning. "You opened the door," Silas hissed. "Now it's your turn to stay." Hands burst from the floor, pale and skeletal, wrapping around Joel's legs, his chest, his arms. They dragged him down into the carpet as though the ground were liquid. His screams were muffled as his mouth filled with dust and rot. The last thing he saw before the dark swallowed him was the bed perfectly made, as though waiting for the next guest. The Beaumont Inn opened as usual the next morning. Housekeeping found room 6 empty, bed neat. No sign of the Harwoods or Joel. The brass key was back on its hook behind the desk, polished clean. The new clerk, hired just the week before, didn't know any better. He saw the empty room in the system and wondered why it was always marked unavailable. That evening, when another couple arrived late and tired, he looked at the full roster, then at the lonely brass key. "Actually," he said, forcing a smile, "we have one more room available." He handed them the key. And upstairs, behind the closed door of room 6, a faint knock echoed from the closet. "3 slow thuds?"